Starting day 4, about to get some breakfast in the hotel lobby, and then getting picked up right out in front of the hotel for today's Lord of the Rings tour. It's sadly raining, but I don't let that hold us back. And, yeah. Having a good time still. But let us see if the rain cuts out, because I want to rope dart in more Lord of the Rings locations. I'll do it in the rain, I don't care. But for videos, I'm sure it'll look better without rain. Alright, see you guys soon. Alright, my breakfast at the Millennium Hotel. See if I can go up and get seconds. Alright. Round 2. Fight. Alright, hell yeah.
So just picking everybody else up from the centre.
Okay. Hell yeah. So you're the tour guide today?
I'm the guide, yeah.
Gnarly.
Yeah.
You got a job I envy.
yeah, it's a lot of fun. You'll see why today. No, the Glenorchy Red Shed. So sometimes we set up outside on the grass down by the lake, folks, but when the weather's not 100%, the Glenorchy Red Shed we actually have permission to set up inside. That's also situated right down next to the waterfront, so we'll definitely be able to get some nice photos there as well, folks, while we enjoy a tea and a coffee. That's all complimentary. Does anybody want an umbrella? Photos at any point along the way, folks. But one of the first things that I want to point out and talk about, I'll put this down for now so it's not in your way, is the Remarkables, which is hilarious because we can't see them this morning, folks. It's just not cleared enough for us at the moment. But one location that we can see, not too far away from us, you'll see there's 2 hills there covered in trees. The hill on the left, if you look very carefully, you'll see there's a house at the very top. Can everybody see that house there? Well, this is one of our first surprises this morning. That house there actually belongs to Peter Jackson, director of the movies. Built himself a holiday home down here in Queenstown shortly after making his $3 billion after the success of the Lord of the Rings movies. That is actually where Peter Jackson stays when he's down here in Queenstown. The hill on the right hand side there, folks, is the reason he decided to build his house on the hill on the right. That is where Arm and Hen was filmed. So at the end of the Fellowship of the Ring, you may remember Boromir tries to take the ring from Frodo. Frodo manages to escape. Luckily, he slips the ring on his finger, goes invisible, and runs to the top of this ruin. In the books, this is referred to as the Sea of Seeing. Now, in the background of this image, that mountain range stretching across the back, folks, is the Remarkables. And it is just way off in the distance, and we really cannot see any of it at the moment, folks. Hopefully it clears a little bit later on for us. On the drive back, I'll absolutely point those mountains out again. I'm going to talk about them regardless, because I assume most of you are staying here in Queenstown. You will see the Remarkables at some point, folks. Now, Peter Jackson actually renamed the Remarkables. He referred to them as the Reusables, and that is because he reused that mountain range in the backdrop of multiple different scenes. So we're going to go through a couple of examples here, all of the same mountain range, just in the background of different scenes. Top image, we have the refugees of Rohan. They're making their way to Helm's Deep. That is in the 2 towers. The image on the bottom, we have Gandalf the White, and he's making his way to Minas Tirith with Pippin. 2 very different locations in terms of the Lord of the Rings, but they are both the reusables, as Peter Jackson liked to refer to them as, just filmed at slightly different times of the year. One of the main reasons I like talking about the Remarkables is because they're used in all 3 movies as the Mountains of Mordor. Yeah, strictly filmed in the summertime, however. The Remarkables lose all their snow for half the year and then start to get it back. They're actually covered in snow at the moment, so hopefully we do get to see them a bit later on, folks. But they are used as the Mountains of Mordor.
Are those the mountains that are next to the airport as we're coming in? Awesome.
That is them. Yeah, so you basically land in Mordor, which is awesome. Now, Mount Doom is not behind there, however. Mount Doom, a Rod ruin, is up in the North Island. It's a place called the Tongariro Crossing, but that is an active volcano. where they did shoot a lot of those Mount Doom scenes. So if you get a chance to go up there, it's not far from Taupo. Definitely a good place to go and check out. And then also one of my favourite scenes uses the Remarkables, and that's the lighting of the beacons. So in The Return of the King, you may remember Gondor calls for aid, and they light these fires on top of the mountain range all the way to Rohan to warn them that war is on its way. Well, there's a couple of reasons why this scene is so impressive. Number one, Peter Jackson got the opportunity to film this scene properly. He actually got permission from the government to build 3 real beacons on various mountain ranges up in the snow and actually set these beacons on fire.
Cool.
So one they flew up and built right on the pinnacle of the Remarkables, another on the Franz Josef Glacier, and another on Mount Earnslaw, which fingers crossed we'll see Mount Earnslaw a little bit later on today, folks, for one of our filming locations. So super authentic and real fires for at least 3 of them. Not only that, but the music that Howard Shore composed for this scene is just incredible. If you've not heard that music before, please don't panic. I am in control of the music on the way home, and I do have a Lord of the Rings playlist which I'll put on pretty much from our last stop all the way back to Queenstown, folks. About an hour's drive. We'll have the soundtrack on to listen to for that last section of the journey there, folks. Sound good?
Hell yeah.
Folks, I know we can't see all of those scenes that I wanted to, but what I do like to do is for the locations that we go to is I will always hold the booklet up like this with the same landscape in the backdrop. This way it gets me out of your pictures, and you're more than welcome to come up, get closer and snap a pic if you want the image of the scene with that same landscape in the background. So this is probably be the one that I hold up for us because we can see the location there, folks. All of our others that we go and see I'll absolutely hold up like this. Ideally, when we come back from our walk, it may have cleared a little bit and we can get a bit of a view of the Remarkables then as well, folks. But yeah, exactly like that. Whenever I hold this up,
South Africa?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, long travel, eh? How long you in New Zealand for?
All in all, 6 weeks.
Oh.
Sure.
Yeah.
Thank you.
is Ithilien. This is where Sam and Frodo first see the Oliphaunts, or the Mumakil as they are technically called in Tolkien's Legendarium. I'm actually going to hold this up here and point out a couple of things. That range that you can see, there is a little cloud coming over the corner here, folks, but this is the section of the mountain range that you can see in the backdrop of that image there. And Sam and Frodo are actually on this ridge looking down at an ambush taking place with Faramir and his Rangers of Gondor ambushing these soldiers, the Easterlings and the Oliphaunts down there as well. This is the scene we're talking about, folks. Now, I'm going to do my best not to ruin the movies for any of you today, but of course the Oliphaunts were not real. They were CGI, computer-generated images, for those of you that don't know what that is. However, Peter Jackson did go above and beyond for the Lord of the Rings. He actually had Weta Workshop make miniature models of all of these fancy beasts first. They were very well made, excellently detailed. Those models were then 3D scanned into a computer program and made to move digitally that way. That is why 25, 26 years later today, the CGI in The Lord of the Rings, at least in my opinion, is still by far some of the best in the world. And that's because a lot of care and a lot of attention went into making these models years before any filming actually took place. Now, another range I didn't think we'd be able to see today. Folks, is the tallest of the mountains. You can see just poking through the clouds behind us. I'll hold that one up there as well. And as you say, you can see the back of Sam and Frodo's heads. They're actually laying down right where I'm stood here, folks. We've got a beautiful shot from the behind the scenes, which I'll show you in just a second. Demonstrates this area really well. So quite excitingly, you guys are actually stood right where the crew, the cameras, and Peter Jackson himself would have actually directed this scene from. This shot is actually taken from where you guys are stood. Sam and Frodo are here on the floor. If you take a look in the top left-hand corner, you'll see this mountain just up behind you, and you guys are stood right where the crew are in that image there as well, folks. Now, I know it's wet, I know it's a bit miserable, but I assume some of you have come quite a long way. If anybody wants to get on the floor very quickly and have a photo laying in the same spot as Sam and Frodo, now is the time. going once.
I'll do it.
You'll do it. Perfect. I'm going to set that up there. You go down there.
So that's just taking pictures, taking a video.
Okay,
right
perfect.
Now, so.
Yeah, no, all good. That is excellent. Perfect. And then what I'm also going to do is, that's it, lovely. Come from this side here as well, just like it is in the film. Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Anybody want to do the same thing? You can do it as well. Awesome. If anybody else wants to at the end, folks, we can absolutely do that. Go. Spot on. And then one more. Perfect. Thank you so much.
Yes.
Yeah,
please.
you want to do it as well? Awesome.
Yes, I got it. Thank you.
One more. Amazing. Thank you so much.
What you're supposed to do is climb down and take a picture of the face.
Yeah, really. The only reason I don't do that, one is because I'm not paid enough, and two, the shot mixing and matching scenes, making you think they're filmed in the same location. They're actually, some of them are filmed completely separate. However, he does recycle locations. For example, the campfire scene that actually takes place before the ambush we just spoke about, where Sam is brought a brace of conies, or a pair of rabbits. They're arguing about ways in which to cook potato. This is where the famous line, potatoes, comes from. Yeah, boil them, mash them, stick them in a stew. Believe it or not, the campfire was actually set up in exactly the same spot as where the ambush actually takes place. Peter Jackson recycled that location twice. And believe it or not, they actually filmed the ambush first, came back weeks later and filmed the campfire scene again then in exactly the same spot. There are actually signs or evidence that you can watch the movies and see that he's using the same spots. For example, if you have to look through the trees, but you can see that same mountain range sloping off on the left-hand side. That's the same range where the slope is just covered underneath the trees. And Sam with his ladle. We get a second appearance of Mount Crichton. That's the tallest of the mountains with the snow on in the image. Yeah, that's just poking out there for us as well. So there are signs that Peter Jackson is reusing the same location. Sometimes it's difficult to spot. Sometimes it's a bit easier than others, folks, but there you are. Folks, any questions from this stop while we're here? Did anybody miss any other photos from the booklet that you want me to flick back to before we go? Yeah. I will always ask at the end if anybody missed any photos. Sometimes I do talk quite quickly, folks, but I'm more than happy to flick back if you do miss out on it.
Just flick back one. Yeah, that one.
That one? Yeah, perfect. Yeah, absolutely.
I like that.
With his red.
Yeah.
Excellent, folks. Lastly, everyone having fun?
Yeah.
Excellent. Folks, if anybody needs any photos taken or any of the filming locations we go to, just ask me. I'm more than happy to do it. But whenever you're ready, we're going to head back same way that we came, over the bridge, back to the bus, and we'll go and see some more when you're ready.
So I'm in Gondor and Ithilien and a bunch of other scenes right now. All right. So right down here is where Frodo, Sam, Merry, and Pippin, where their trailers were when they were filming in these locations and camping out here, while like Ian McKellen and others had hotels in Queenstown, not too far away from here. And so this is where they would use the restroom. And I'm gonna pee where Frodo peed. You guys want to see? I bet you do. Sir Peter Jackson. Right up there. Very cool.
Over the other side In the corner, you can see all that snow at the top. That's currently falling as we speak. So if it's raining down here, folks, this time of year, it is snowing at about the 600 metre mark, which is pretty much where these clouds are sitting. That's about 600 metres from lake level, that is. We are still about 800 to 1,000 metres above sea level where we are.
So we are above 800 feet.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Don't feel it as much.
So, a couple of things to point out. I'm going to stand somewhere like here, so you guys can all enjoy that beautiful view behind me, folks. There is one mountain we can see, so I will talk about it. It's sort of the game we're going to be playing today, whether I can see the mountains or not, folks. Obviously, it's a bit annoying, but right down at the head of the lake, we can just see the bottom of this beautiful pyramid-shaped mountain. The bottom looking out, just under the trees, under the clouds at the bottom there, folks. That there is Mount Alfred. Mount Alfred is actually our first Hobbit filming location this morning. And Peter Jackson flew the dwarves up to the top of Mount Alfred, dropped them up there to film scenes of the Misty Mountain Pass from that first Hobbit movie. So you may remember the dwarves leave Rivendell and they start making their way towards the Lonely Mountain. Before they get there, however, they have to pass over the Misty Mountains, and a couple of things happen to the dwarves while they're actually up there. They witness the Battle of the Stone Giants that takes place, those huge rock formations that come to life and start hurling rocks at each other. Balin actually refers to that as the Thunder Battle. Shortly after the Thunder Battle, the dwarves are captured by the goblins, and we get the goblin tunnel scenes that then take place underneath that mountain range. And that's where Gollum is, and that's where Bilbo then finds the One Ring. Now, obviously, the goblin tunnels and the stone giant scene was filmed inside of a studio, very heavily CGI. But in terms of The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, Peter liked nothing more than to actually get his actors out into the elements, onto real mountains and real locations, just like that mountain down there at the bottom. So here you can actually see the dwarves passing over Mount Alfred, and on the right-hand side of this image is all this snow. This ice wall actually belongs to Mount Earnslaw. Now, we can't see it, but I'm going to talk about it anyway. When we get there eventually, we're going to be driving right to the foot of Mount Earnslaw by the end of the tour, so we will see it nice and up close, folks. But you can see the side of Mount Earnslaw next to Mount Alfred. We should be getting, unfortunately. And Mount Earnslaw is sitting right on that sort of right-hand corner there, folks. Now, Mount Earnslaw, in terms of The Lord of the Rings, is where they filmed the Pass of Caradhras. So, this is where the Fellowship attempt to pass over that very snowy mountain, and Saruman sends a blizzard from Isengard. They get caught in all that snow. They then decide they can't go over the mountains, they have to go under them. And that's when we have the Mines of Moria scenes which take place, which are some of my absolute favourites, by the way. But this is a really good example of what everywhere looked like when Peter Jackson flew his team to the top of Mount Earnslaw. He dropped them up there for about 45 minutes, flew around them to get these absolutely insane landscape shots. But there is no CGI used in that image there, folks, whatsoever. That is a completely raw image. In fact,
Were the hobbits really fast?
yeah. Sorry?
Barefoot?
No, they had prosthetic feet on, but they didn't have. So they're not warm.
No.
So yeah, you're still very cold. In fact, one of my favourite quotes from Peter Jackson is in the documentary when he's talking about this scene. He says it's very easy for your actors to act cold when you put them on the top of a glacier with very little protection. So that's exactly what he did. Right in the middle of the Fellowship here, you might even be able to make out a very small silhouette of Bill the Pony. And Bill the Pony was the beast of burden that went with the Fellowship to carry a lot of the luggage for the hobbits. Unfortunately, the snow was so deep up on the top of Mount Earnslaw at the time that the real Bill the Pony just wouldn't have been able to move around safely. So Peter Jackson knew he was going to have to compromise. Luckily at the time, there were two ladies going around the South Island of New Zealand with a two-piece donkey costume. They actually operated themselves. Peter saw it and he absolutely loved it. So he asked the ladies if they wanted to come and help out and be in the movie, to which they of course said yes. So for about 4.5 seconds of screen time, that is actually two ladies playing the front and back end of Bill the Pony up on the top of Mount Earnslaw throughout that scene. Now, again, all the stories that you hear from me are actually in the documentary. So you can see the ladies up there and you can see them actually up there filming that scene. Last thing I'll mention, some of you will know already, but Sean Bean, the actor who played Boromir in the movies, was terrified of heights. He doesn't like planes, and most of all, he hates helicopters. And Sean was so terrified when he got to the top of Mount Earnslaw, he actually did this scene in one take. and that's the take you see in the film. He then actually decided that was the last time he was going to get in any of the helicopters for the rest of the production. He actually took it upon himself thereafter to get into his costume at about 4 or 5 o'clock every morning, drive as far as he could up some of these mountain ranges, and sometimes hike for 2 to 3 hours just to be there on time for the shoot. So there is footage again in the documentary of Sean hiking up the Remarkables back in Queenstown in the snow. He's in his full Boromir costume. He's even got the shield on his back, but he's wearing Ray-Ban sunglasses in the footage, so you'll be able to spot it pretty easily. There we are. Any questions from anybody while we're here, folks? Anybody miss any photos they want me to hold up?
Probably that one, yeah.
Yeah, I'll do both of these ones. Yeah, I've just heard actually that they showed the first 7 minutes of Dune Part 3 at the film festival that's just been, not sure where it was actually. And apparently it's that is another one to look out for when that comes out.
So when they were filming, was the tour just not going to Arcadia? Or?
No, we're still allowed to go. We pay for access, so they can't stop us. However, we're not horrible people. We're not there to get in the way. So more so expensive now, but super expensive back then. And yeah, you want to sort of be in the helicopter for as little time as possible, just using it for that sort of transportation, getting to where the filming needs to be done, turn them off, leave them there. One of only 2 others around the world, actually. One of the others you'll find in Patagonia, and the other you'll find in Tasmania. And these trees are what we call semi-deciduous. That means continuously throughout the year, these trees are dropping and growing leaves at the same time. So it's often mistaken for an evergreen forest. As you can see, we're now in autumn, folks, and from a distance, these trees look completely green. However, if you look around, you'll see scattered around these beautiful golden leaves forming on the top of the trees. And if you look on the bed of the forest on the left and the right hand side, you'll see the place is absolutely littered with those beautiful golden leaves. So this forest always looks like autumn inside. There is always this carpet of golden leaves all over the bed of the forest, and that is a big clue as to what filming location Peter Jackson used the inside of this forest as. However, what I will say is you'd actually be correct in guessing any of the 3 forests that are memorable from the Lord of the Rings and Hobbit movies. For example, Mirkwood, Fangorn Forest, and Lothlorien. Peter Jackson actually recycled this forest 3 times for both the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit movies. So not only is it used as Lothlorien, it's also used as the eaves of Fangorn Forest, and it's also used as the eaves of Mirkwood. However, the inside of the forest is not used as Mirkwood, and it's also not used as Fangorn. It's just from the outside looking at these trees. And that'll make a bit more sense when we get to Arcadia Station, which is just around the corner, folks. Now we've got Mount Earnslaw on our right hand side. Getting a nice view of that from where we stopped. Both The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe and the Prince Caspian Narnia movies shot in this location here as well. In terms of The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe, this is where the children first meet Aslan in that first movie. This is where the tents are all set up, and it's where they first see the talking lion. Which is a complete coincidence, by the way. C.S. Lewis, who wrote the Narnia Chronicles, and Tolkien were actually very good friends, and they had both passed away when their books were adapted into movies, and completely by coincidence their movies were then filmed in exactly the same country on the... Not actually too bad. I think it might have just stopped raining actually. That's good. Folks, I'm going to start leading the way. So again, just watch where you're stepping for me. If you walk where I walk, you should be pretty safe.
Mushrooms. No.
Indeed.
Oh, they are?
Yeah.
I thought it was an egg at first when I double checked.
Okay. Shallow, almost perfectly circular riverbed of the River Dart. That is actually the main reason why Peter Jackson chose this as the location for Isengard. This is the Wizard's Vale where we are here, folks. I'm going to hold this up somewhere around there for you guys to get that all in the background. This mountain on the top right hand side of the image, folks, is Mount Earnslaw, the one that you can see directly behind me. That is the glacier that we just couldn't see from Bennett's Bluff, so thankfully we're getting a nice view of that mountain from here now, folks. Now, Peter Jackson actually used Mount Earnslaw as the centre beacon for these Isengard scenes. What I mean by that is he was able to shoot scenes for Isengard elsewhere in the country. As long as he placed Mount Earnslaw in the background on a blue screen, he could trick the audience into thinking all the scenes were filmed here in this location. Just like this one, for instance, with Saruman and Gandalf in the beginning of the Fellowship of the Ring. This is before Saruman has been corrupted. This scene was actually filmed up in the North Island, a place called Harcourt Park. That's where Sir Ian McKellen and Sir Christopher Lee performed the scene together, but they've actually placed the Mount Earnslaw ridgeline in the background to make it look as if it was also filmed here in this location. Simple and effective camera tricks, folks. Now, Isengard was actually a model that Peter Jackson had Weta Workshop build. It's what they call in the trade a bigature. That is a big miniature. 18 foot long and 12 foot high. Big enough for Peter Jackson to actually walk onto with his camera, get the close-up, intricate shots that he wanted. They then superimposed this model over the circle of the River Dart. So Isengard is basically just two images layered over the top of each other. You've got these beautiful mountains and the Mount Earnslaw Glacier as the backdrop. Add the modelling over the circle of the river, and that is what gets you that in the final cut of the movies. Yeah, very simple, easy camera tricks again, folks. Now, they did also make miniatures for Isengard. For example, the tunnels that run underneath. You may remember where Saruman creates the first of the Uruk-hai, those fighting orcs that capture Merry and Pippin that can run in daylight. I'll show you exactly what those miniatures look like in a second. So the miniatures for Isengard looked like this. And if you look at the top, you'll actually see somebody's trainers right on the top corner of that image. So you can see the size comparison from some of those bigatures compared to some of those miniatures. Peter Jackson is a big fan, as we know, of a practical effect. He actually wanted the flooding of Isengard to be done practically. So when the Ents come down from Fangorn Forest, the forest you're looking at over there, folks, the walking trees, they break the dam, which then floods the plains of Isengard. Peter Jackson actually had these miniatures destroyed with buckets of water. They filmed it in slow motion, and that is what you see in the movie when Isengard is flooded by the Ents. It's actually really these miniatures actually being destroyed. And then finally, before we move over onto the Hobbit, we have Saruman casting his spells to the pass of Caradhras. That is the snowy mountain that the Fellowship are on top of. That wind.
That's Saruman.
That's Saruman.
There's a fell voice on the air.
But that is the Mount Earnslaw ridgeline, the pinnacle of the Orthanc Tower model. A little bit of CGI with the clouds, and also a tiny little CGI Saruman right on the top of the tower there too, folks. But there you are. Folks, any questions from Isengard before I then go over onto the Hobbit? This is also a Hobbit location. Awesome.
Is the dam that burst, is it that area or
Also a miniature.
miniature?
In terms of the movie, it's up that crevice.
Okay.
Yeah, but no, it doesn't exist.
Does it? Okay.
Yeah. In terms of the Hobbit movies, folks, this is actually where Beorn lives. Beorn, from the second Hobbit movie, is the skin changer. He can transform from this huge character here into a massive bear. That's sort of his magical power. Now, when we're first introduced to Beorn, he's actually chopping wood. And you may notice the same backdrop behind Beorn as Isengard. For example, we've got the slopes of Mount Earnslaw. Pluto Peak is the name of this mountain, just peering through the clouds on the right-hand side of the water. And we can see the tops of these three peaks poking up there as well, folks. But you may notice behind Beorn, there is no river in the background. They've actually completely removed the river to avoid confusion. Peter thought that if they left the circlet of the River Dart in the background, eagle-eyed viewers may realise that Beorn is living inside of Isengard, which makes no sense in terms of the geography and the maps that Tolkien actually had drew for the films, for the books, sorry. However, this garden is where we're currently stood. Beorn is actually not very far away from us there, folks, and his house was built right next to this beautiful tree. Now, this is called a golden Tatara, and if you spin around, you see that tree is still here, folks, just up over the side. Walk up to the top here with me. Now, normally, folks, that's where we would drive up to the top of. The farmer doesn't want us driving up there when the weather's like this. As you can see, the track leading up to the bottom, it's super boggy at the top and super boggy at the bottom during weather events like this, folks. So this is as close as we will get. However, you can see the tree, the house is not up there, folks. Everything that gets built on Arcadia for these movies has to be taken down afterwards. That way other movie companies can come and use the natural beauty of the area without having to either physically or digitally remove anything before and after they've started filming. But Beorn's house was one of the most impressive sets they actually had built for the Hobbit movies. They decided to build Beorn's house entirely out of stone. All four walls and a roof was built entirely out of stone and slate. They then built two replica sets for the inside. So one was huge and it made the hobbits look small. Hobbits and the dwarves look small, sorry. One set was then really small, and that's where Ian McKellen and Beorn actually performed their scenes. So one of them is really small, one of them is really big, and then they actually just overlapped the footage. So you're seeing two separate pieces of footage, but transparent, filmed over the top of each other. And that's how they did the Force perspective in the Hobbit movies. Slightly different for the Lord of the Rings. They actually used a physical form of Force perspective. So you have one character that you want to be tall closer to the camera, somebody you want to be short, you have them further away, but you line up the camera in the right position, and it actually tricks our minds into thinking one looks smaller than the other. But yeah, it was practically done for the Lord of the Rings and used more multiple filming or CGI to actually make the hobbits look smaller in the Hobbit movies. But there you are, folks. Any questions while we're here? Would anybody like a photo with this beautiful? Yeah, we're still running the rain.
Do you know where they film it for Hunt
Which is quite exciting too.
for see the same mounted ranges?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So we're actually soon to be a Lord of the Rings, Hobbit and a Hunt for Gollum tour.
Nice.
Yeah. So we may even start our own full day tour because there'll be more locations out here for the Hunt for Gollum. And at the minute it's hard enough to keep rolling through. We get a lot of ground to cover even just.
I always fall asleep at this scene.
I'm thinking about the scene when they meet Saru.
Spoiler alert for those of you that have not seen the films, but this is where we lose Boromir, folks. So this is where the Lurtz, which is the name of this orc, kills Boromir. Now this is one of those locations that has unfortunately changed quite a bit over those 25, 26 years. As you can see, the trees in the background, folks, some of them have fallen down, some of them have even been replaced with new ones in this time. But this is where the final departure of Boromir is filmed. The only mainly the most unfortunate thing about with this scene is it's also filmed at the bottom of Arm and Hen. Arm and Hen was the first scene that we spoke about. So with Aragorn fighting all of those orcs at the top of that ruin, that's filmed back in Queenstown. You then have the bottom of Arm and Hen filmed here in this location. However, the tree that Boromir dies up against, folks, has fallen down. It's no longer here, which is a real shame. That is a location that people have been going to for the past 20 years. I think it was about 7 or 8 years ago when that one fell down, folks, so I've not seen it myself either. I've only been out here 3 years myself, but I don't like lying to people. Although, pick a tree, they all look exactly the same. But it is filmed in this very section of forest. Now, believe it or not, as we know, Peter Jackson is very good at recycling his filming locations, folks. And if you take a look on the ground, you're going to see a very large clue as to what Peter Jackson then used the inside of this forest as. Same section, as you can see directly behind me. You'll notice a couple of differences, however. Firstly, this beautiful carpet of golden leaves all over the forest floor, folks. Well, for the Boromir death scene, Peter Jackson actually had a team go around and collect as many of the golden leaves as possible to actually get them out of the way. However, when they then came back to film Lothlorien, this is the entrance to Lothlorien, coming down the trackway just behind us, we can see the Fellowship, or Aragorn, and whoever's right behind him, coming down the trail behind us. They actually used the leaves they removed to then lay them on the ground to make this area look as golden as possible. But that is a practical effect rather than a visual effect actually added in afterwards. However, if you've been to Hobbiton, you'll know that Peter Jackson is very particular about leaves. And it actually wasn't golden enough on the floor for him to be happy. So he actually collected thousands more leaves and they took them down to the primary school in Glenorchy and they got the children to paint them. To really paint them, yeah. In the documentary, Peter Jackson calls that getting the children involved. I'm pretty blunt and I like to say things how it is. That is cheap child labour. That's pretty much all that is. Unfortunately, The leaves that had paint on are not biodegradable. They actually ended up having to collect up all the leaves,
Ooh.
remove them and dispose of them properly, just to look after this environment as much as possible. When you watch the documentary, you'll see how important it was looking after the locations, the really rural locations they were going to, looking after them, not stepping on the moss and things as well, which is the last thing I'll mention. While we're in here, folks, you can actually see this forest used to be completely carpeted in this beautiful moss. Unfortunately, a lot of that moss has been walked on over the years, and it dissipates really quickly once you walk on it. So I do ask everybody, try not to walk on the moss for me, folks. You can see it out on the eaves of this area. Over there in particular, please don't walk on that stuff. That's a really good area for me to point at people and say, this is what this area used to look like. So definitely don't walk on that stuff, folks. Obviously, where we're stood, you're more than welcome to wander around, that's fine. Just, yeah, try and limit yourself to the areas where you can see the moss has already been walked on, folks. That is massively appreciated. Any questions while we're here?
So when they were filming, was this road like blocked off for?
So, funnily enough, they had a camera set up on there, and you may remember seeing a scene of orcs running, and the camera's basically running with them. They're running right next to the road.
Oh, cool.
The camera's pointing this way. It's not filmed right here. It's a little bit further up, but yeah, that's how they did it. The camera was
Very
on the wheels on the roads. They also had a zip line through with a camera on the top, and that shot that you get of them, the orcs from Aragorn running to Boromir, who's fighting them off with Merry and Pippin. That camera is just a bit let loose, following over the top of these orcs, and it follows down through the woods, and eventually then down to basically this section here where that fight is taking place. Yeah,
Very cool.
there you go. Movie magic. Any other questions before I get the props and the costumes out, folks? Awesome. So, a couple of things to note. Right-hand side in just a second, but it was way over that side where the filming actually took place. But you'll recognise it.
Yeah.
And that's actually the ecological wetlands of Glenorchy.
All right, just had lunch with this guy from Germany called Philip, and this other guy from South Africa called Sesh. And walking back to the hotel room now. Really beautiful view. And yeah, so I'm gonna be, we were talking and we were like, hey, they were talking about taking a bus to this town to check out some more Lord of the Rings locations, and they were thinking about taking a bus and doing it, and I was just like, well, how far away is it? And I was just, well, I can drive us. And they're like, what, really? So I'm gonna go back to the hotel room for an hour, get everything situated from the Lord of the Rings tour today. I got some props, like the One Ring and the Even Star and the brooches. So yeah, gonna drop off some stuff. I also picked up some stones at the locations, like at Ithilien, and also I picked up a stone where Boromir was shot, and also Lothlorien Forest, both in the same location. Took some photos there, and yeah, it was really cool meeting these dudes. Big Lord of the Rings fans too. And yeah, so I'm gonna see where the day takes me because I don't really have anything else planned today. Alright, journey continues on. We are in Arrowtown now. Gonna check out the Fords of Brunnen. Sash and Philip, my new friends. We are getting close to the Ford of Brunnen, where Arwen is taking Frodo across the river to escape from the Nine Ring Race.
Oh, nice. There you go.
I think that's it. Yeah, I think that's where they come out.
Yeah. They came from this way. I think the water horses came from there, didn't they?
Yeah.
Because of the stones on the side.
All right, now we're going down the same river and trying to find where we're trying to find where Isildur got shot by arrows and fell into the river. So thankfully we have Google Maps to help us. All right, I think we found it. Where Isildur got shot and jumped into the water.
For me, like that gives you the